today we will have a dialogue, and I'm deeply honored to be a partner of this dialogue because it will revolve around the book which I had a great honor to write conjointly with Professor Bauman, Moral Blindness, the Loss of Sensitivity in Liquid Modernity. And with your kind consent, I would like just to initiate something like the opening part of our discussion. And I would like to mention several things, several topics which we try to cover in the book and which we try to address today. Moral blindness. This metaphor by José Saramago was suggested by Professor Bauman, and when we were working on the prospect of the book, I remember many things came to my mind, and then I started consulting Professor. And Professor Bauman came up with the title Moral Blindness and something containing a message to the world, and at the same time a very special, I guess, framework of meaning which contains some nuances of this great paradox. On the one side, we know that we live in an epoch of accelerated life. This accelerated life allows us to switch to the most remote places of the world. We know what's happening in Indonesia, Malaysia. We know almost every single aspect of Chinese political life. There is nothing that could be hidden from our sight in Thailand or the United States of America. So we know almost everything. And at the same time, if we talk about the ethical aspect of the whole picture, we have to say that there are some paradoxical implications for our moral or ethical existence. One of them is the question whether we became more sensitive to human suffering. We are perfectly aware of what's happening in Tibet or some other long-suffering places of the world, but the question is whether we react. Last night, Professor Bauman elaborated on the concept of memory, which is stored for us. Every server, every operational system of this global computer network stores our memory. There is no need for us to remember everything because the machine remembers for us, so to say. We Google, and all of a sudden, many things can pop out without our ability to remember some aspects of cultural history or political history. They pop out, they keep popping out as if to say that don't worry, this information is with you any minute, any time. But the question is, what is the relationship between remembering and forgetting in this age? Yes, any machine, any computer can allow us to know what's happening there, but we know that there is such a phenomenon as the willful forgetting. And dear Zygmunt, if I may address you by first name as usual, what is the paradox of this situation? Milan Kundera was writing about our age as the age of forgetting, not only the age of remembering. Modernity promised with this great historical memory project to remember everything. The modernity kept its promise to allow us to cover world history. At the same time, we know that modernity is not only about remembering, it is about forgetting. It is about the willful forgetting. What is the dialectic of this remembering and forgetting nowadays?
Well, when I was a young man, I remember we defined the difference between culture and nature. Nature is what we have not created, what is there around us, which we only partly control, which has its own logic, independent of our thinking, which can't be wished away, and so on and so on. But culture different from nature, because culture is what we have to learn, what is not given to us, but we have to learn. With some considerable exaggeration, I would say today that culture is not about learning, but about forgetting. And as we realize recently, most recently, our sensitivity in one respect grows, sensitivity to laws of nature, to our impact impact which we make on nature and the catastrophic consequences which it might have. Now, nature, as we recently realized, does not allow itself to be forgotten. It reminds us all the time of its presence, of its unpredictability, of its, running away from our efforts to control it. Culture about forgetting. Culture is about forgetting. Why? How to explain this phenomenon? Well, there are many factors which contributed to this phenomenon. One, quite obvious one to everybody, you are all dividing your life between online and offline. When you write your essays for your professors, end of the term, end of the year, you are opening Google, you are asking Google to help, and Google is your memory. You don't keep it here in head. You are just releasing the information from it by using not so much your brains as your fingers. You just press the right buttons, you get it. Therefore, you are not so burdened by memory as we used to be. I used to be when I was a student. I had to memorize. I had to memorize because otherwise obtaining information would be damn difficult. I would need to browse in the libraries through 100 or 200 books in order to get one bit of information, which you get in 1 second or few seconds. If it lasts longer, you get impatient. So the approach to obtaining knowledge, retaining knowledge, has changed. Well, but there are more serious even reasons I wouldn't like to suggest you, and please don't interpret me in such a way, that what is happening, why culture from being about learning and memorizing turns into culture is about forgetting, that is due to technological revolution. It is not technologically determined. Technology only helps us on this process, speeds the process, make it faster, make it easier. But there are more important reasons for that. First of all, there is collective memory issue. But modernity was a challenge to collective memory. Modernity was a program to leave it behind, the past, to leave behind the past. There was the very deep trust in virtually unlimited ability of humans to change the world, to make determination by the past invalid. Just push it out of the way in order to remake men or women, to be sure, remain the surrounding, the settings in which we are going to act, make it all more adjusted, better adjusted to human requirements, to our needs, to our desires, and so on. The audacious, extremely courageous program, ambitious program of modernity was to get free of being determined by outer circumstances, to be guided by the vision of the future rather than by the circumstances of the past. Well, when people are running, you can ask two questions. One question is where from they are running, what pushes them, what pulls them forward or pushes them from behind. And the other question which you can ask is where to are they running? 100 years ago still, I think, it was like that, more or less, that people could answer both questions. They were running from the atrocities or inconveniences of the past, something which was wrong. For example, human inequality, unemployment, poverty in very many places around, opulence, the inconveniences of daily life, the hard, inhumanly hard effort which you had to make in order to produce the goods which are necessary for human survival. All that was pushing from behind. I wonder whether you remember the interpretation which Walter Benjamin gave to the drawing by Clay, by the artist Clay. I call it the angel of history. It was a vision, that was his interpretation, of angel of history moving backwards, moving with his back turned to the future and looking at the past and pushed into accelerating movement by what he saw. In the past, he saw human suffering, so he wanted to run away from it. And that was the motive of history, that was the motive of progress. But, Benjamin could say something more, as if the angel of history at that time, that's my awkward suggestion, awkward correction, had two pairs of eyes. Well, one pair turned to the outrageous past, which was unacceptable. He wanted to run away from it, but at the same time, he had another pair of eyes behind his head, and he was guided, pulled by the vision of the future. Now, I think that the vision of the future was vision of improving, making the world hospitable to human public interest. Humans have interest in some organization of the society in which everybody has his or her own place, right place, is at the same time secure of existence and at the same time provided for being daring, for having the courage to take a risk, to be free. Now that is roughly the idea of the future. So both questions which I mentioned, where from people run and where to people run, were more or less answered. I suggest to you, ladies and gentlemen, that what's happened in the last several dozens of years is the demise of the idea of the vision of the conception of public interest. We don't know really what does it mean. We are not sure about the answer to the second question, where to we are moving. And the both metaphor which comes to my mind in this context is Reinhard Koselleck's idea of mountain pass, as if we are at the moment climbing a very steep mountain. When you are climbing a very steep mountain, you can't really stop. You can't put your tent there because the first gust of wind will, of course, sweep them away. You can't stop. You have to keep climbing. But you have no idea what you will see when you reach the mountain pass, the top, the peak. There will be a new landscape. You have no idea where to are you going. Now, our map of movement has been cut down, in a sense, shortened. The long term is in a big trouble at the moment. We are not capable of thinking in long term. What's happening in last 30 years, 40 years, is that we kept being surprised by events. We are virtually every week we have another sensation, another information about something which no one anticipated, no one expected, or if some people guest that was coming. They were not listened to very carefully. They were in minority, voice crying in wilderness. So most of the people were completely unprepared for what was happening. Our vision of the future shortened. What's happening is not what Francis Fukuyama, you still, I hope, remember the name, he made his name by saying that we reached the end of history. That was a very stupid remark, really, because history will end only together with humanity. As long as humans are around, history will go on, because humans are very transgressive beings and they constantly change conditions of their own life. But something really happened. And, well, I would suggest to you that what came to an end was not history, but future, the idea of future. Modernity used to be guided by the vision of the future. This vision could be a fata morgana, it could be a false promise, but there was always going not just out of something, but also toward something. We are still running away from unpleasantnesses, discomforts of our situation, but we hardly can be sure, collectively speaking, where to we are going. That is combination, as you probably see, of two factors. Memory on the collective level. Here is crisis or end of future, crisis of the idea of public interest. And on the individual level, we live, I'm terribly sorry to repeat myself, in liquid modernity, which means that when we are going to bed, we are not sure whether we will wake up in the same world as before, whether everything will be okay, whether your job will be still your job. The other company won't eat up your own company, and there will be new round of redundancies, of economies, austerities, and so on. Whether your savings will retain their value, or whether there will be a credit collapse or banking collapse or something like that. So living in liquid surroundings, liquid memory, liquid modernity, you are not inclined really to go by habits, by things which were previously working properly for you, but you can be sure whether they will retain their value in the future. So you have to be vigilant to what is happening and try to note the change in the right time. I call it our understanding of time, which is different from understanding of time in the past, pointillist. I wonder whether you saw pointillist paintings, which consist of a lot of points, very little colorful points, but only the imagination of the painter made the composition out of them, gave them a visible shape. Otherwise, they could be put in all sorts of orders, and they are as if independent from each other. Pointillist type, consisting of points, cut down to very short-term episodes. Episode, it has a beginning and has an end. You know that it will going to end. Points, as you remember from your school, have no dimensions. They have no width, no depth, no length. They are just imaginable points in crisscrossing of some lines. But, as you know, some points are very important. There was a point in history which is called Big Bang, when everything, the universe, was created out of nothing. Now, the interesting point about Big Bang is that the cosmologists cannot can tell us in very great detail what happened a few fractions of the minute, in few seconds after the Big Bang. But they can't tell you anything whatsoever what was there before Big Bang, which means that you can't anticipate which point will be a Big Bang. You have to be careful not to miss it. You have to be very in constant haste to try to be online, not to lose touch. This reality running so fast around us create the feeling of uncertainty, of tremendous uncertainty. You can't rely on anything you learn because, well, I'm terribly sorry to say, but most of you are students. You go to study, you have to get the skills because you know that there is a demand for the skills on the market. Who knows if your study, your effort to get these skills may take you 4 or 5 years, and when you complete your study, you are very proud of yourself, and rightly so, you have got your skills, you suddenly find out that very different kind of skills are required, and there's very little market for the skills you acquired. Now, that is the condition of uncertainty, and connected with that, also the feeling of impotence, that really control your future had very little chance, The foundation of the shortening memory of individual life is could be conveyed, could be shown. The frailty of this foundation could be shown when you recall what Jean-Paul Sartre told young people. He told them what he told when I was a young person, so I remember it very well. We listen very carefully to Jean-Paul Sartre and try to follow his advice. Jean-Paul Sartre gave a recipe for life, for good life, satisfying life, dignified life, and that was make yourself projet de la vie, project for life. Decide what you want to be, And once you have done it, the rest is just the consistent effort to follow the requirements which are attached to the existential condition of that kind of person you wanted to be. At the basis of this advice was, of course, the expectation that the change in the world is very slow. That when you start on your project and when you fulfill your project, the requirements will be the same, more or less. That enabled, that pushed people to plan, to think long term, to think in terms of the impact of everything they do for the closing on the target which they set for themselves. Well, when I still was a teacher at the university, I was telling my students about that. They meekly remarked that they would be very happy, not to mention Project for Life, they would be very happy if they could make a project for the next year. But they couldn't, because the pace of history was so fast. I repeat what I started from. Collective memory and individual memory are both under counter pressures, which invalidate the value of them. I'm not sure whether they are rightly invalidated or not. I would rather say, I have the feeling that they are leading into astray by telling you that you should forget about memory and the necessity to memorize. But nevertheless, that is the reality at the moment.
Yes, and the question arises as to whether we became more sensitive. So we know much more, infinitely more than our ancestors did. But the question would be, how about our ethical relationship to the world and to humanity? For instance, the very fact that we know what's happening in the most remote places of the world, how does it relate to our ethical responses, to our ethical abilities to react to those things? For instance, do we react to really fundamental threats to humanity, to really heartbreaking stories, or do we react to fundamental problems of human rights violations or catastrophes or tragedies, or do we react to fictionalized stories? To fictionalized stories. And my question is quite simple, because look, Zygmunt, we have 122 self-immolations in Tibet. 122 people burned themselves alive. Does the world react? What is to be done to make the world react to some tragedies of the world? But suffices for a high-ranking official or president of a country to tell a heartbreaking story of his nephew or niece who is trying to drop, for instance, addiction, and the entire nation celebrates the guts and the willful power of the family. But what's happening at this point? Is it the loss of the ethical dimension or a hyper-communication which makes us stupid?
Yeah. Well, it's a very big question. It's not easy to answer it right away. And particularly it's very interesting to talk to Professor Donskis always. Whenever I have the opportunity to do it, I have tremendous pressure because he asks all the pertinent questions, and I always have to stretch myself. And in the end, even if I succeed in convincing someone, I always fail in convincing myself with what I'm saying. Off-cuff answer to this question is that we have two crises among so many other crises which are around us. One is the crisis of instruments, and the other is the crisis of imagination. The crisis of instruments, of tools. It's very simple. Professor Donskis rightly suggested that we are all on the planet now interdependent. What happens an incredible amount of miles away from us has impact on your prospect of life and your children's prospect of life. Impact which you are sure exists, but on which you have very little influence. It somehow co-determines the range of options which is open to you. So dependency is already global, but the tools of action which we have remains localized as before. We don't have a global instrument of global action. They don't exist. There are some meager beginnings of it. Professor Donskis knows much more about it than I do, because he is not only a theorist of politics, but a practitioner. He spent a number of years in European Parliament. He sees it from higher level than I ever was able to and will be able to. But the question is that even United Nations, mind you, United Nations, which was created after the Second World War to prevent all future wars, was the reaction to the experience of pre-war times, and therefore it was written. It was written in the statutes of United Nations that their purpose, their task, is to defend tooth and nail unencroachable sovereignty, territorial sovereignty of every political unit. Now that's a fiction. unencroachable territorial sovereignty of nation state. And not only a small state, relatively small state like Lithuania, but even such big states like United States or even China or Russia cannot be fully in control of things which happen on their territory. There is global interdependence, whether you like it or not. It happened and it will continue. But the instruments of actions are confined to the territorially sovereign territory of a state. We don't have global. That is the crisis of tools. Dependency transgresses, leaves behind our ability to act. You can't close the accountancy books within the realm of one single taken nation state. And the second is crisis of imagination. Crisis of imagination, the great ethical philosopher of 20th century, Hans Jonas, put it to us that our technology, our technological ability means that we can influence the future of our planet. Not just, your own garden, but our actions, our pollution of atmosphere, our impact on the average temperatures of the globe and so on is so big that geologists already say that instead of Holocene, which was considered to be the current geological epoch in which we are placed, had been replaced already by Anthropocene, namely our anthropological human actions are the major factor in shaping even geology, in shaping the geological condition of the globe. We can influence the future, knowingly, unknowingly, deliberately or inadvertently, but that's what we are doing. But, he said, Hans Jonas said, our moral imagination is still at the level of Adam and Eve. So didn't change since our ancestors were living in paradise. That's what they had moral reactions to what they saw, what they could touch, what they heard, but hardly stretch it to the abstract things out there. Well, Professor Donskio mentioned the tragedies which happen all over the world. We react to that morally, but it is sort of moral, momentary, explosive reaction. We just reach to our wallets. We give a few pounds or lits or zloty or whatever currency you have to people who suffered. But that is it. We don't change anything, really. We are not going anywhere near the cause of tragedy happening. Just to join our efforts in order to prevent, to make the globe more hospitable, more pleasant, more gratifying place of our common life. So, crisis of imagination. We did not develop, Hans Jonas asked us to develop the morality of distance. Morality of distance. We don't have much of it. We don't feel, we may have this impulse, moral impulse, when we see a human being suffering, attacked, assaulted. Our impulse is to go and help, Now, things like that happened all over in the world now. There are plenty of domestic tribal wars going on, for example, when one category of people murders another category of people. In the end, everybody murders everybody inside. We are not reacting. We are just not feeling responsibility for what is happening far away from our home. As simple as that. Mind you, there was an explosion of moral compunction at the latest catastrophe in Lampedusa. You probably heard about it. Lampedusa is an island offshore Italy, where to which the migrants, the illegal migrants not allowed into Europe, are trying to get in order to get bread and fresh water, drinking water, survive. And of course they are not allowed the entry, and therefore they have to pay over their nose to collect all the savings of the family in order to pay a smuggler of humans. And they try to cross the Mediterranean on unseaworthy boats. And this boat, which was kept away from the shore by Forex, the special organization created by European Union to keep unwanted people away, now they don't allow them anywhere near the coast, and it sank. It sank, and several hundreds of people died. There was an explosion of compassion. Nothing is happening. Nothing is happening. The latest news I heard was that European Union thinks of adding another task to Forex, namely to the task of preventing people from reaching Europe, also the task of some sort of a salvation body, help the people who are in danger. Now, how to combine these two functions is a mystery to me. I don't know. It is just going around the problem than trying to handle it.
Yes, and you mentioned the European Union, and of course I'm quite tempted to mention the European Parliament.
Sorry?
So the European Parliament, which I'm going to mention, is organizing every year the Sakharov Prize competition. So we award those who defend human rights all over the world. What is surprising is that instead of trying to convince ourselves and the world around us that we defend human rights, civil liberties, fundamental rights, we organize, and this is my guilt too, we organize beauty contests of politicians who try to come up with the most moving story, the most fictionalized story. What I'm saying is that this ethical dimension, it disappears just right before our eyes. You described in your books the modern condition which you called adiaphorization. And I think this is pivotal. It's very important to mention how does it happen that those things that are dramatic and tragic, they lose their contents. They're just zombie concepts or empty concepts or empty phrases. For instance, genocidal practices and catastrophes of the world become nowadays just aspects of foreign policies. Or for instance, if we take some horrible words, they inflate, they suffer inflation, and people are talking about the Holocaust of Turkeys before the Thanksgiving Day or things like that. How does it happen that we lose the ethical dimension? We use the words that have no contents. We use the phrases that are empty. We're parroting the past. We're parroting the world without putting much ethical content in it.
Well, the roots of what you described are very deep. What may have changed recently is just that it is because our imagination, our knowledge about distant places is better. We have instant, in real-time information of what is happening. So we are aware of much more human disasters than we used to be. 100 years ago, people learned about distant disasters when they were already over. We can actually watch them on our television screens or on our mobile telephones. So the situation has changed, we are aware. But the roots of the problem are very, very deep. And who knows, perhaps they even have anthropological dimension. At the end of my road, at the end of my life, I came to the conclusion that I didn't find the good answer to that. Well, Immanuel Kant already said there are two mysteries he can't crack, he can't understand. One is the starry heaven above him, and the other is the moral law inside him. And it remains mystery to this very moment. My personal teacher he didn't know that he was my teacher. I selected him from far away. But anyway, my teacher of philosophy of morality, Emmanuel Levinas, spoke about the moral impulse, which is released simply by the face of the stranger or the other human being. And it is released, what it releases is the feeling of responsibility for his or her condition. And it is, mind you, very important to distinguish, not responsibility to both superior public opinion or whatever which can punish you for not subordinating, but it's responsibility for the condition of the other, the other for whom we feel responsibility, cannot punish us. He doesn't give us commands. He doesn't order us to do. He even doesn't ask for anything. He has no power to do so. What releases our feeling of responsibility is precisely his or her weakness, inadequacy, insufficiency. He needs us. That is the only reason for our moral feelings to act as an impulse for action. But Emmanuel Levinas was painfully aware that it all goes very well when there is face-to-face, one-to-one encounter. But what about when the third person appears in the picture? Now there is a problem. You have to compare Mr. A needs with Mr. B needs. Or Mr. A and Mr. B may be in conflict of interest, and both will require you to take a stand, to join one against the other. Now, all this basis, this natural impulse of morality, does not help very much in such a situation. But we are all living constantly, not in company of another human being. We are living in company of many human beings. We are living in a neighborhood, we are living in a community, we are living in a country, we are living on a continent, we are living in the world. And how to pass from this moral party of two to society as a whole, to social life. How make social life is possible? That was one Emmanuel Levinas consideration, and the other was that the impulse of absolute responsibility for the other is a recipe for saints. For saints. We are not saints. Most of us are not saints anyway. And a society consisting of saints only is virtually unimaginable. So, if Hobbes told us that society is necessary to stop us from cutting each other's throats, Emmanuel Levinas told us that society is necessary to enable us to live with the feeling of absolute responsibility. We have to cut it down. Adaphorization. Really, adaphorization is unavoidable in a sense, some extent of adaphorization. namely cutting down the absolute requirement of absolute responsibility, giving everything, sacrificing everything, and so on, to a code of rules, which makes it possible. You just say, well, there's no paragraph to do that, and I am free. I can quiet down my moral pains. Simply, it was not required to me to translate the recipe for saints into recipe or a code of rules for ordinary people like us. So adiaphorization as such, I don't think is avoidable. We have to live with it. But I agree completely with Professor Donskis that adiaphorization made tremendous progress recently in the world, really. In the solid stage of modernity, adiaphorization was the work of bureaucracy. Max Weber created, as you know, the ideal type of bureaucracy. He meant to construe the ideal type of rational behavior. Rational behavior. Rational behavior means, among other things, ability to separate what is relevant from what is irrelevant. To make choices. There is an incredible amount of consequences of what you are doing. You are just taking what is really important and separate it, forget for the time of your action of what is influential, insignificant for what's going to happen. Now, that was work done by bureaucracy. If you worked in a bureaucratic institution, in an office, you were asked, as a condition of your employment, to forget about your own personal preferences, sympathies, antipathies, attachments, commitments, loves, antagonisms, and entering the building of bureaucracy, follow only the commands coming from the top of bureaucratic institution. I don't think that today bureaucracy is the major source of adiaphorization, of that making people enforceably insensitive to the impact of bureaucratic action on the object's well-being. I believe that this role was taken over by consumerist market, really. There is something like that, what could be called commercialization of morality. The specialists of marketing, the researchers of markets, and trying to find new unexplored areas which could be used for profitable marketing, found these moral impulses of which we are speaking about. This feeling of love, of friendship, wishing well to people who are, near and dear, in a sense, even if our long-term, far-away imagination is failing, then at least people around us, within our sight, within our reach. We wish well to them, but, my dear friend, it is not easy to do, because in order to help them, you have, first of all, to earn the means of your own existence. You have to pursue a career. You love your son, you love your wife or your husband, you want well to them. Now, if you love your child, then you need to spend a lot of time with the child to listen to what's happened in school today, what the bully, what harm he did to the child, and what difficult tasks were set for homework and so on, to show compassion, to show care, to show your love to child, which is tremendously important for the child to grow into a decent human being. Well, you wish to do so. You are an honest person, you want to do so. But if you do so, you will do it at the expense of your career. Your career, you are on a back and call to your boss. Since mobile telephones were introduced, you can't find an excuse. I'm terribly sorry I couldn't take the phone, I was away. I went outside. You don't go outside without your mobile telephone. You are always on a back and call. And you promised, for example, your little son or little daughter to take them on Sunday to zoo, but on Saturday you get a telephone on, that the report is required for Monday morning, and of course zoo is forgotten. You are exposed to the threat of unclear conscience. The more you are a moral person, the more strongly you feel the awful, because you can't fulfill your moral impulses. And marketeers found it as a very prolific source of earnings. You can transform Christmas from religious holiday into commercial holiday. Just compete with each other in bringing gifts to your children. But if you want really to do so on the occasion of Christmas or of First Communion or other family festivities, you need to observe the requirements of your career. So you have to work even harder than before and be even more engaged in things which keep you away from implementing your moral impulses. The shops sell, therefore, independently of the kind of commodities which they put on shelves, they sell also moral tranquilizers. Moral tranquilizers. You just quiet down your moral feelings, your moral scruples by buying gifts. The latest edition of iPhone, not 4 but 5, soon I think that 5B is going to be introduced, and next year probably there will be iPhone 6. Now your child, when he or she gets iPhone 6, will stop being ashamed when among his colleagues who have already the latest and he have the old one. So that's very powerful. It's very powerful, hidden, not open, like in case of bureaucracy, hidden, but nevertheless, very powerful means of adiaphorizing, quieting down, insensitizing to moral needs, moral impulses, moral obligation. Remember that what you buy in the shop are moral tranquilizers, which is really very helpful psychologically, but they are all substitutes for the real moral relationship to people. What people expect from you is to show them not that you part with part of your money or make your debt on credit card even bigger in order to share it with them, but that you are there for them when you are needed. Now the presence, the emotionally expressed care, togetherness. Now all that is replaced by exchange of gifts at some point, routinely at some point during the year. It's a process which is going on, which expands, and which is threatening also to the future of our moral sensitivity.
It's deeply symbolic, I guess, that you mentioned the name of the philosopher you love, Immanuel Levinas. He was born here in Kaunas. Kaunas is the city of Manuel Levinas before his French life and French career. But I find myself thinking about three statements, and this is the final question before I give the floor to the audience with their comments and questions. Richard Sennett wrote about the fall of the public man, and Jürgen Habermas wrote about how the public colonized the private. And you say that things seem very opposite, that privacy conquered the public. And I remember one interesting thing. We talk about literature, especially putting a strong emphasis on Orwell, George Orwell, who warned humanity about the loss of privacy. But in fact, I have to say that it's an old topic, and we have some examples in Baroque literature where, for instance, Luis Vélez de Guevara, the Spanish writer of the 17th century, or his successor, Alain René Lesage, the French writer who wrote the Diable Boiteux, the Devil on the Crutches, they described how the devil showed his gratitude to one student, allowing him to see the most intimate aspects of human life in nighttime Madrid. So, meaning that the devil had a special function to see the most private and intimate aspects of human life. Normally people would think that if you can expose someone else's intimate life, there is something devilish about it. Nowadays, we have a very strange situation. People expose their lives willingly, with great joy. We have many reality shows where people expose their lives. There is not a reason to be pressurized. They do it on purpose. They're very happy to expose themselves. Otherwise, they would think that they live an unimportant and wasted life. What happened then? The death of privacy accompanied by the crisis of the public? Are they going hand in hand, jointly?
No, following your metaphor, I would literary metaphor, I would say that we are possessed by devils now. Devil acts from inside, because we are living in a confessional society in which we installed microphones in confessionals. Confessionals are symbols of the most private, most intimate feelings, which you confide only in the conversation with God. And suddenly we install microphones there and loudspeakers on the public squares, and we are pleased when we are heard by as many people as possible. Not only we keep that in secret, read, by the way, Georg Simmel, beautiful little essay about secrets, he presents secrets as tremendously important element in building personality and building human relations, building the networks of friends and so on. But we want to make what is idiosyncratic to us, what is private, what is unique, we want to make it into a profitable secret which attracts public attention. Look, in one way, internet opened tremendous opportunities in front of you, which would never existed before. You can enter the public arena just by moving your fingers, sitting in your chair in your own room, without help of television cameras, like that, big other companies, radio broadcasters, editors of big, widely read dailies, on which the emergence from nowhere, emergence from anonymity, emergence from public non-existent, was dependent. Unless you got access to the covers of glossy magazines, unless you get access to television cameras, to the broadcast centers, radio centers, and so on, you had no chance of emerge from your meager, low position in society in which other people were in the lights of projectors, they were seen on the public scene, you were remaining unseen, unnoticed. I think that Mark Zuckerberg, inventor or thief of Facebook, that he made his billions of dollars on this feeling, really. He noticed that people are feeling very badly because our idols today in the limelight are celebrities. Celebrities are people who are known for being known, and they are known simply because they appear so often on television screens and are written about in newspapers and so on. You don't have access to it. But Mark Zuckerberg gave you. You made an account in Facebook, and therefore you can show themselves in so many photographs there, really. I am eating my breakfast, I am playing with my cat, I am playing with my dog, that's my latest girlfriend, here we met, there we parted our ways. You know, this sort of thing, exactly what the celebrities do. They are famous from exactly such things, really. And so it is a substitute, available substitute. It is the poor man's substitute for haute couture. Haute couture is, you know, the example to follow, but inaccessible to most of us, and therefore for the rest of the people, what remains is the blank copies of that latest fashion. No wonder that we expose our weaknesses and our alleged hope for strong points on a only public instrument which we have. And that's precisely your account on Facebook, your Twitters, which you can send in one moment to 1,000 or even more people, hoping that you are emerging by the same token from your seclusion, cyber seclusion. I think that what Mark Zuckerberg made his billions of dollars on is precisely our fear of being left alone, of being unnoted, being neglected, not paying attention to, and so on. That's the explanation why we don't care about privacy any longer. Privacy, our private, intimate experience is the only capital we have which we can sell on the publicity market.
I guess now the high time for the audience, if anybody wishes to ask a question or to make a point, yes, please go ahead.
I have a note. I think that we should separate the ideas. Where does the compassion come from? And what our society is actually doing.
Could you speak up?
Of course. Okay, so my worry is that we don't clearly separate two things. One thing is feeling, and another thing is thinking. And for compassion to become material, we have to feel it first. And in this society right now, we are not left with the time to feel anything. It's like, as you said, it feels like as we are running for something. Like we have to think, or do, and there is no time to feel. And feeling, I mean, emotion, as someone says, is motion in... I'm sorry. What I'm trying to say is, like, maybe there is a possibility to give people a reason or a time just to feel something. And another thing is, as Leonidas said, about 122 people who burned themselves, and I can tell why I'm not reacting. So at first I didn't even know that such event had happened. So and I'm more worried about saving my own life than someone else's. And another thing is, it feels like we are so far away. So that's my point. Thank you.
I think that it is a very, very right remark, really. We don't have time. Time, as we all well know, it's constantly in deficit. We don't have enough for things which are happening. We are always in a hurry. We are living in a hurried life in which pace of events accelerates constantly. We don't have the time for feelings. Feelings are not asking, by the way, whether you have time or not. So there is some qualification to what you said. Feelings are coming uninvited, and that's the point which was made by Emmanuel Levinas, among other things, that it comes as an impulse. And you are in need then to do something. Now, what you can do, that's the whole problem. What options are open to you? You can rush to the help. You have no time, however, because you are kept by other duties, by our obligations. You can replace this direct expression of your feelings, of your care, by all sorts of substitutes. For example, gifts which show that you are interested, that you are not insensitive, but nevertheless they are not actually a response to the substance of the matter. But nevertheless, whether you accept, whether you admit that you are feeling that, or whether you try to avoid it, the feelings are there. The fact that you are in a hurry is not the solution of the question. It's not an excuse. You can raise this sort of excuse in the court of law. And the legal specialist can say, yes, you didn't have time, you couldn't do that, and that is an excuse, and you will not put in prison. But in the court of morality, it's not like that. You will feel guilty. You will feel guilty even if the court of law absolves you. That's the dilemma with which we have to live. That's the kind of a world we have constructed ourselves and are keeping alive. The big problem, to which I have no good answer, however, unfortunately, is how to make the world more hospitable to morality. And this world which we live in is not hospitable to morality. The solid modernity had very many awful consequences, a lot of atrocities it created. It was one category of people insensitive to another category. It created the hierarchy of values which enable people unpunished to exercise their coercion, their violence in order to other people who were denied human features and so on. All sorts of awful things happen in solid modernity because of the setting in which people were put in relation to each other. But one thing which solid modernity had and which liquid modernity lost, much to its detriment, was what I call the factory of solidarity. The industrial enterprises, for example, which employed hundreds or thousands of people, big industry, for example, was whatever they produce, whatever the nature of their products, they all were factories of solidarity. They just brought to human awareness that they are all in the same boat, they are all under the same condition, that they can gain tremendously, each one of them, by joining forces, by standing together, by rebelling together if necessary, but that collective action is the essential condition for individual well-being. That's the basis of solidarity. Contemporary philosophy of management has changed very considerably. I wonder whether you remember scandal with a company called Enron. Enron, when it was still alive, was described by Fortune, the most important press organ of business, as exemplary institution whose strategy of management should be followed by everybody else. Now, Enron has chosen as the basis of its management strategy the principle of keeping its employees in a state of constant uncertainty. Constant uncertainty. It routinely made redundant every half a year, it was a routine in Enron, 30% of employees. Not because 30% of employees regularly proved to be unfit every half a year, but simply to bring to the awareness of all employees that they may lose their jobs if they don't try hard enough. They succeeded in inserting the idea into minds of their employees that they are not in the same boat. On the contrary, they are their adversaries. They are their adversaries. They are in competition with everybody around. When it comes to the next round of redundancies, it is in Donskio's personal interest that Bauman is made redundant, and in Bauman's personal interest that Donskio is made redundant. So instead of becoming factories of solidarity, contemporary institutions are very often, all too often, factories of mutual suspicion and competition. And that makes the situation less hospitable, not more hospitable to moral feelings. Helping your person sitting next at your desk or next to your desk, now it could be suicidal because he will prove to be more profitable, more useful for the company than you are. And then when it comes to austerities, and it has to come to austerities, it has to come to cuts at some point, then you will be the victim of your own goodness. Teaching suspiciousness and competition is sort of solidarity. If we are discussing moral blindness issue, I think that is the topic which couldn't be omitted.
Yes, I think that we reached the point when I have to thank Zygmunt Bauman and to tell you something. In fact, there was a wonderful emphasis made by Zygmunt Bauman on our society, which is a society of attention-seeking, self-exposure, and confession. In fact, much of our literature, especially celebrity literature, is confessional literature. And we live in the age of confession and self-exposure. But happily, we live at the time when it is possible at a university to have a speaker like you, Zygmunt, a sage, an analyst of modern life, someone who translates a high art of social theory into a conversation about what it's like to be a human being. And for this, I thank you from the bottom of my heart.